Adam Soos here for Rebel News. Very happy to be joined by Tariq Elnaga. Tariq came here 12, 13, 14 years ago and checked out the Calgary Stampede, fell in love with what he saw there, and he basically changed his life. He moved here, became a bona fide cowboy. Since that time, you've also been sort of an advocate. You fell in love with the Western style lifestyle, so you've been working to defend it from foreign interests, both abroad, but also particularly foreign interests as in Ottawa.
Yeah.
I wanted to join you. You probably qualify yourself as a separatist, and we had conversations leading up to the last provincial election. We've had conversations about federal politics as well, but I just kind of wanted to garner your perspective. Not that you speak on behalf of all Alberta separatists, but you've got a pretty good idea of where they're at. First off, with regards to this new provincial government, sovereignty acts, advocating unapologetically. There's been a categorical shift compared to the NDP, but certainly also compared to prior UCP governments. So as a Western separatist, just talking on the provincial level in and of itself, would you say that things have changed enough that there's a bit of a sort of dissuasion, or at least there's perhaps a sentiment that maybe this can work?
It's a great question, Adam, and I would say that one, I'm very happy with what I'm seeing, and I've always said this, whether back when I ran or today. Separation isn't going to be an on-off switch for Alberta where one day we're part of Canada and one day we're not. It's going to come incrementally. And it'll come incrementally in the form of us having our own pension plan, our own law enforcement, our own control over energy jurisdiction, and that the spectrum of separation is very deep, where some people, yes, want to leave Canada tomorrow morning. And some people are like, well, perhaps we could be a nation within a nation, almost like the deal that Quebec has.
Right.
So the thing is, I would say that, Adam, on that spectrum, we're moving in the right direction where Alberta's getting its own thing. So I wouldn't say that it dissuades the separatist movement by any means, but I would say that this is the right thing because it won't come as a switch where we just kind of flip the switch and tomorrow we're no longer part of the country.
And that sentiment that we're being bullied and we're in an abusive relationship that we've talked about in the past is starting to dissipate. Now, one of the other things we talked about, so generally people are pretty content. Polling and support for Premier Danielle Smith and her government is quite strong presently. Certainly we've seen strong budgets. It's hard to argue that Alberta is not on a better trajectory. Things not perfect, but a better trajectory. We've talked in the past about how, though federally, our votes don't particularly matter. Once you're past Toronto, it's decided. But we suspected that those votes wouldn't change. But polling suggests that Trudeau has alienated even those people, and that there is a shift likely to take place. And if we're looking at things, we are looking at a conservative government, and perhaps a conservative government federally under Pierre Poilievre that is maybe not entirely conservative, but closer to the type of conservatism that Albertans want. Is that right?
Agreed. So here's the thing. A Poilievre government will always be better than a Trudeau government. Hands down, every day, every single day. The reason why Poilievre is trending well is not because of Alberta and Saskatchewan. We've always been a conservative stronghold. He's trending well now because he's finally within the GTA and so on, realizing that the issues that affect them, so that's cost of living, that's the carbon tax, there aren't necessarily Western autonomy issues, are now, he's speaking their language. It's not a bad thing. It's good that he's polling well. It's good that he's doing well in the GTA. But ultimately, it goes back to the same thing you and I were talking about. It's the GTA that decides. So we've had to wait 8 years for the GTA to finally turn on Justin Trudeau when they voted him in not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Now, I suppose that prompts the question, though, is have they really changed, or has Trudeau made it so bad that they're like, dude, I don't really care about the politics. I just want to be able to buy groceries and pay my bills, maybe buy a house one day. Have their priorities shifted towards conservatism, or is it just Trudeau is that bad?
I think it's the latter, Adam, where I think Trudeau, things are really bad that, when they're going to be losing homes, when they when they aren't able to pay for their mortgages, when groceries are getting pretty expensive. But ideologically, I think that the GTA is a liberal stronghold. I don't think that they're conservative. And if I look at what Pierre Poilievre is selling right now, it's straight up just common sense. I wouldn't even call it left or right, right? A carbon tax isn't going to save the planet. So common sense says, why are we still paying it and penalizing people in a country that's super freaking cold? So the thing is, I think that's very reasonable. But my challenge for Alberta is, why did we have to wait 8 years for the GTA to turn on Trudeau?
Right.
And the second thing is, what happens in the next cycle, right?
Yeah.
It's this never-ending cycle where, I mean, the GTA donuts, if you will, not so much Central Toronto, voted Stephen Harper in.
Yeah.
I would say that Stephen Harper was a great prime minister, did not damage the West, etc. Was he exceptional for the West? You know, I personally think that it wasn't outstanding, but it wasn't certainly bad.
Right.
But I think that when I look at Pierre, I say, you know, he's speaking their language now. It's straight up common sense, but I don't think that the GTA's turned conservative, so to speak.
Well, and I mean, going back to the sort of provincial notion, the conservative governments we've had provincially in the past haven't been that conservative or good for Alberta.
Correct.
Now we have a government that's like unapologetic, that is standing up, and they're polling well. So whether it be Saskatchewan, whether it be Alberta, Pierre Poilievre is like, well, I better get ahead of this parade, so to speak, in the Ralph Klein parlance.
Right.
But and that's what we're seeing is this trend of a little bit more authentic conservatism. But you're right. The question is, I mean, Harper was a moderate, sensible, decent, economically minded guy who didn't do much wrong. Most of the scandal around him was bogus. And the people who took more than 8 years to turn on Trudeau were calling Harper Hitler.
Correct.
So is this just a cycle and we're going to get more of it?
I think so too, and I also think so, and this is speculation on my part, I think that if the Liberal Party changes leaders, and especially gets a guy that can, I mean, everybody's been tossing Mark Carney's name around. He's run 2 central banks, so from a economic understanding and economic literacy, he'll speak a better game than Trudeau.
Yeah.
Could that be a stick in Poilievre's side? Potentially.
Yeah.
Now, I think that the Liberals have done enough damage that it won't be for this cycle, and Mark Carney is likely aware of that. But the thing becomes then, yet again, we're dependent. Mathematically, we will, in Alberta, never determine who sits in the Prime Minister's office. That will be the GTA, right? Again, I always said it, GTA's got 53 seats, Alberta and Saskatchewan together, 48. That's just the GTA. That's not the province of Ontario. That's not including Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto, and Vancouver, which are, you know, Liberal and or NDP strongholds.
You know, the sort of final question I have for you, I don't think Pierre Poilievre and a federal government will ever be quite as conservative as the Danielle Smith UCP presently. But I think we can probably agree they'd probably advocate for Alberta energy. They'd probably advocate for industries. They drive costs down. They do most things pretty well. The place I have a concern and a question, and lots of people wonder how different they are from the Liberals, is immigration.
So there's a number of, I'll call them political landmines that Pierre Poilievre has not touched. One is immigration, whether that's numbers or even just an expectation of cultural assimilation. Because what we're seeing now is immigrant diasporas bringing in their issues onto Canadian streets without really an expectation of understanding this country that we're in. But the other part of it as well, he's come out against or not in support of the APP, the Alberta Provincial Pension, which to me is a concern. He hasn't been speaking about provincial autonomy, and again, if I look at it objectively, you know, these are we're going to vote for him anyways, right? Like the West wants Trudeau out, and I get that. But the thing is, these issues don't poll well in the GTA. Right, because again, large immigrant diasporas, etc. Plus, Western issues are not a GTA voting issue. So that's where my challenge is. So again, I will go back and preface it and say, Pierre Poilievre, any day of the week, a better PM than Justin Trudeau. But the thing is, though, what I'm loving and seeing here in Alberta and Saskatchewan is 2 provincial premiers who are steadfast and now unapologetically pro-autonomy. And to me, in that spectrum of independence and separation, autonomy is a great step, and I love it, and I love what I'm seeing.
Well, and I think the core of the issue there is, and I mean Albertans, I think Quebecers as well, given some of the history and what's happened, they're apprehensive, they're mistrusting of government, as everyone everywhere in the world should be, I think, rightfully, because you give power, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's what people will very often pursue. But ultimately, push come to shove, we might get a good cycle. We might get a good 8 years. Trudeau was so bad. But ultimately, if Toronto doesn't change, politicians are going to have to placate to Toronto in order to win the federal government. Isn't that right?
That's exactly it. That's where the seats are, right? If you put the seats in Ottawa, Toronto, and Montreal together, that is more seats than Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan as provinces have, right? So 3 cities. Ultimately, your job as the leader of any conservative, or any party rather, conservative or liberal, is to get the most amount of seats, right? So where are you going to go and cater to is the issues of the downtown voters of Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal. Their issues are different than ours. I'm not saying they're better or worse. You know, you decide that. But their issues are widely different than rural Alberta. And why should we have this one policy fits all across the country when we're culturally different, we're economically different, our ways of life are different? So that's why I'm seeing now the 2 provincial premiers really getting ahead, and I love that.
Well, and I think that model, the sense of subsidiarity, bringing it down to the smaller groups, if a Poilievre government can perhaps, hopefully, permanently reduce the size of government, reduce the public sector, and make it so the provinces can handle their businesses, address the responses and needs of their people, Canada can remain unified in that framework, not if it heads down the path that Trudeau has been taking it down. Tariq, I want to thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, sir.
And for everyone at home, I want to thank you so much for tuning in for Rebel News. I'm Adam Soos. There's nothing more awkward than trying to connect with someone, maybe an extended family member, maybe a brother-in-law, something like that you just don't have something in common with over the holidays. But just imagine, you arrive at your Christmas gathering this season, and someone walks in wearing a shirt that you know they got from the Rebel News Store. Imagine the conversations you will have with that person. That's why I'm encouraging you now to go to rebelnewsstore.com. You can get great shirts like this shirt I'm wearing. Due to inflation, I am your Christmas gift. Lots of other incredible shirts like that, all at rebelnewsstore.com. Go there, get them now, order right away so that they arrive in time for Christmas. Get one for yourself, get one for friends, family. They make incredible gifts, and they go a long way to support us in telling the other side of the story. Again, go to rebelnewsstore.com.